Since its inception, the Fallout series has stood out amongst its peers due to the rich lexicon of lore and stunningly familiar setting put forth in the games, taking a world that we all know and flipping it into an atomic wasteland that we have all considered a possible future. Though the Fallout universe skews from ours sometime after 1945, what we see still resembles the world as we know it today. The old world blues that some people in the wasteland are feeling starts to rub off on us as well. The sinking feeling that life used to be so much better and never will be that way again, it can really hit home. Subscribing to the channel for more Fallout content like this can really hit home too. That's just a thought. One of, if not the most decisive moment in the Fallout timeline is the Great War, the moment the world was plunged into nuclear fire. With so many spinning cogs in the situation, information can get muddy, which is something we see in the Fallout universe when it comes to the Great War. The only thing that we can really be sure of is that in the United States, life as we knew it came to an end. As tensions escalated worldwide, the boiling point came October 23, 2077, when multiple warheads hit US soil, leading to the destruction and collapse of the country. Sounds pretty cut and dry, sure. Things got real and the world developed to warfare. Things aren't always as cut and dry as they seem though. We can really only go off of information that's found in the game universe, and outside what was just covered, there isn't a whole lot there. And this has led to many debates about not only the Great War itself, but the participants as well as the instigator. And that gets called into question all the time. That is precisely what we're going to be looking at today, as I explain my theory on who actually kicked off the Great War in the Fallout universe. I'll be going over a bit of what we know about the Great War, and how I came to my theory that Vault-Tec, the same ones who made the vaults across the United States, are responsible for starting the war. I even have a pretty good smoking gun when it comes to evidence, at least I think so. And if you have a different theory, or you think mine is bunk, feel free to hit the comments and talk about it. I try to respond to everybody.
Fallout, an increasingly important word in the atomic and hydrogen age.
One of the first things people bring to the table when arguing against the theory that Vault-Tec started the war is that it all kicked off due to the Sino-American War, which saw the US and China pretty much exhaust themselves over resources for 10 years. Claiming that is pretty simple. Both countries fought long and hard, but ultimately when faced with defeat and lack of resources, they resorted to a failsafe of nuclear warheads. On paper, this all makes sense. We can see the escalation, and it's not a hard story to follow. This adds up. It's when we start to scratch through the surface that things start to go askew. It's stated that China launched the first missiles due to being out of options. And this is where my first questions begin to arise, as Chinese subs had been identified by American intelligence moving into position, and Chinese bombers were picked up heading over the Bering Strait. Now, wartime can be quite perplexing sometimes, but I would imagine that China would not have attacked on such a vast scale after moving a bunch of units to the target. This show of force actually punches holes in the official story regardless, as that hardly seems like a force that is, quote, out of options. It seems the Chinese army was gearing up to take the battle to mainland US soil, not obliterate the world. Now, this could mean a few things if we take my theory into consideration. Arming ourselves with the knowledge that officially the US says China launched first, we get this information without argument, as we have no way to check on China to see how things are post-war. As usual, terminals and holotapes can fill in the blanks, but we are still getting the story from the United States point of view. Of course, it wouldn't be a fair assessment without looking at the possibility of everything we are told being true. China launched first, perhaps a preemptive strike, resulting in the US firing their payload until the world was cast in fire. Still, it just doesn't add up when you start to dive deeper into the lore behind Vault-Tec and what would become the Enclave, which is where I like to begin my theory. Due to the events of Fallout 4, we actually have experience in the pre-war timeframe of the Fallout universe. Previously, the only time we would see real glimpses into the pre-war was through VR pods like the Tranquility Lane simulation and Operation Anchorage, with the former being more of an idealistic view of what once was, and the latter being an absolute war zone at the front lines of the Sino-American War. Neither of which giving us any insight into the Great War itself, nor shining any light on how pre-war life operated in the Fallout universe. In the opening of Fallout 4, we not only get to see some glimpses of real pre-war life, such as the way homes operated and other minor details, we also get to see the start of the Great War. In all honesty, the games have retconned this event before when it comes to things like time frame and location, but one thing is held constant: China shot first. Yes, in the DLC for Fallout 3, Mothership Zeta, we see hints to the Zetan alien race being the real culprit behind nuclear holocaust. Still, by the time we get to Fallout 4, it is reconfirmed that China shot first. This is why this moment is so debated in the Fallout universe. We aren't being told the truth. When approached in Fallout 4 by the Vault-Tec salesman, we see a bit of the theory take shape. The theory being, of course, that Vault-Tec was the one who kicked off the Great War. The salesman seems very tense. During the conversation, we can get the hint that not only does the salesman know that the apocalypse is coming, he knows it's coming soon. Some may write this off as tension when discussing such a heavy subject, but I'm looking deeper. If the salesman at Vault-Tec has knowledge of this event, the higher-ups surely do as well. This is actually confirmed through multiple games that Vault-Tec is one of the only groups to have advanced knowledge of the Great War, the other being the shadow government of the United States, the Enclave. From a broad perspective, it makes complete sense that the Enclave would have this information. For the most part, they're the ones fighting the war behind the scenes, or they at least have a significant stake in it. But why does Vault-Tec? Seemingly, the company used the propaganda and fear caused by the world's tensions to capitalize with their brand of underground fallout shelters, the Vaults. As we know, Vault-Tec is never doing exactly what we believe on the surface, and this again is where the Enclave comes in. We have already normalized the fact that the Enclave knows that the world is going to be set on fire. It's all a matter of when and why. Why would the Enclave want the Great War to happen? What would be the benefit of tipping off Vault-Tec? And these questions are easily answered. Vault-Tec has many vaults across America. Except for a few control vaults, all of them act as some kind of social experiment. While it could be easy to write off Vault-Tec as some kind of rogue scientific entity using the Great War to further study humans, the truth cuts a bit deeper than that, as the Enclave are the designated group that receives these results. That's right, the Enclave are the ones collecting the data from the Vault-Tec experiments. Knowing this, we can see why the Enclave would tip Vault-Tec off to the Great War, and set into motion the events that would allow them to continue this work post-war, using the data to rebuild America in their ideal way. The Enclave would watch the Sino-American War closely, waiting for tensions to rise and resources to deplete, biding their time until they would give the green light to Vault-Tec, whose CEO isn't doing all this work for nothing. He needs to be sure that there will be a war big enough to get people underground. So, they take their chance. The Enclave sends a green light to Vault-Tec once they see Chinese forces closing into the mainland. This is an excellent opportunity to kick off the war and destroy enemy equipment while doing it. One of two things happens at this point. Vault-Tec receives the green light, they either engage a false positive on US radar, forcing the United States to retaliate with their own nuclear weapons, or they engage the country's own missiles against them, forcing the start of the war and blaming China as they do it. Either way, the result is the same. Warheads hit American soil, the people go underground, and for the next 2 centuries, many vaults act as hellscapes for your own worst nightmares. Also, the Enclave can collect what data there is, and so the Vault-Tec CEO could have safety and wealth during the end times. Now that we've tied both the Enclave and Vault-Tec together and explained how it is very likely the Great War was a result of their planning, I can present what I believe to be a smoking gun. It comes from a very unlikely place, the canceled Fallout movie. Of course, I know by its very nature a canceled movie is hardly canon, but I argue that the truth lies with what's written in the treatment. The movie itself doesn't need to exist or reflect the game for this theory to hold true, and it really focuses on how things work behind the scenes. If you were to watch the video I made on said Fallout movie, which is linked in a card to the video if you are curious, you would notice that the writer is not familiar with the games in any way, but he follows a rough story that vaguely resembles both titles that were out at the time, of course Fallout and Fallout 2. It would be pretty unlikely that he would just guess major factors of the story of Fallout, so he had to be getting his information from somewhere. Most of the time, when someone is doing work like this, writing a treatment for a movie based on another story, they'll be given an outline or maybe even some bullet points to hit on. One of the Fallout movie's significant conclusions is that Vault-Tec kicked off the Great War for their own benefit. I argue that this wasn't something that the writer just made up. It's far too important to just wedge into the story. It's literally a turning point of the ending. I think this information was given to him while he was making the outline for the film by the creators and developers of the game. Interplay had made their own film company and had complete creative control over the project. This would mean that this was the plan all along, to cover the real story of the Great War and tell a false narrative, much like people expect America would do in this scenario. Of course, this is all just a theory. Many things get retconned when new games hit the streets, and this event is no different. I do believe Bethesda holds on to this moving forward and leaves hints along the way. Even if there's things like the Zetans being involved, that doesn't remove Vault-Tec from the picture. It certainly doesn't absolve the Enclave either. It just means that there are more puzzles to this than we realize. Thank you for watching my video about who really started the Great War. If you enjoyed it, think about leaving a like and subscribing to the channel for more Fallout content. I want to thank my patrons and YouTube channel members, and a special thanks to my biggest supporters, Kim Jong-un, Broadway, Jake Schweers, Hackerman, Irwin, Fireflare, Laud Have Mercy, Corbin King, Primarch Mustard, Edge, Death6199, and Ark Dornan. You guys motivate me to continue through all the hard times, and I couldn't do it without you. Thanks again for watching. I will catch you on the next one. It has been Mantis.
I gotta testify. Come up in the spot looking extra fly. For the day you die, you gon' touch the sky. You gon' touch the sky, baby girl. Testify. Come up in the spot looking extra fly. For the day you die.